Hello, and in this edition of the podcast, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Aileen Edgar, and she teaches ATAX. But let me perhaps ask her to introduce herself. Good day to you, Aileen.
Hi Tom, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. So yes, my name's Aileen Edgar and I am a tax tutor with FME Learn Online alongside Tom. And yeah, I teach both TX and ATX.
Multitasking.
Yeah, and of course tax changes every year as well, so that's good fun for updating all my notes and materials and questions as well, yeah.
You must have been bad in a previous life.
I think so. But I do love tax, so I don't mind.
So tell me a little bit about your background before you came to this interesting world of online learning.
Yep, so I've been teaching tax since 2008. I've taught for ICAS. I've worked on the exam team at ACCA as well, signing off the tax papers for UK papers and overseas papers. And I've been working freelance for the past 5-6 years. I have updated notes for BPP, Kaplan, various other universities and learning providers. And I just stumbled across FME Learn Online a couple of years ago, thanks to your good self. And I'm really glad that I joined such a good bunch of tutors, I have to say.
Fantastic. Sounds like you've got a rich diversity of experience there to bring to the students. So, you know, I teach SBR. SBR is a core paper, and sometimes a student asks me, well, what shall I do next? And the choice is there with the strategic professional. So why do you think a student should choose to do ATAX?
I think it's one of the more interesting subjects. I think students, generally speaking, are training to be accountants because they do have a love for numbers, and luckily in tax we do have a lot of numbers, and also it's something that people are generally interested in. I think when you are studying to be an accountant and your friends and family find out, they'll start asking you questions about tax because everybody is interested in something to do with tax. It's something we can all relate to, and so
it's something we all have to pay, isn't it?
We do, unfortunately, but I always say it's a privilege to pay tax. I'm not sure everybody has the same viewpoint on it, but that's how I see it. And so I do think it's really important for accountants and everybody actually to have at least a basic understanding of tax rules, why we pay them, when we should pay them, and take responsibility for ourselves. So I think there's that interest that everybody should have.
And if you're coming up from the skills, if you're coming up and you've previously studied the tax paper, what's the difference between the skills level tax and the ATAX? What's the crossover, or how would you summarise that difference?
At the ATX level, it's much more about taking a scenario, whether that be an individual taxpayer who's maybe coming close to retirement age, or maybe it's looking at somebody who's starting up their own business and wants to know whether to set it up as a sole trader or a company, or maybe we're looking at a big group of companies. And at ATX, it's much more about looking at those scenarios and understanding all the different tax implications that can affect that scenario and that taxpayer, that client. Whereas at TX, we keep all the taxes pretty much separate, and you learn them separately, you apply them separately in questions in the exam. You don't have to deal with more than one tax at a time. But ATX, you're expected to use all the knowledge that you've got to actually be able to give clear, helpful, correct advice to that client about a range of different tax issues. So that's probably the main difference, I think.
And if I'm a student and I've done tax a year ago, 2 years ago, the Finance Act keeps on changing, doesn't it? And there's that assumed knowledge. So how do you, as an ATAX tutor, how do you address that?
Yeah, it's something that students get quite worried about. They often contact me and ask me, what should I do? Finance Act's changing. Will I have to start from scratch? And I know it's easy for me to say, but I really don't get stressed out about it, because actually when you look at how much changes from one year to the next, it's never going to be the case that you have to start from scratch. You will have some retained knowledge there. And yes, rates change, thresholds change. Sometimes we do have new bits of rules come in and you will have to learn a slightly different approach. But the basics are always there. The fundamental basics are still there. And even if it has been a number of years since you studied TX, whether that be at university, tax, or ACCA TX, you will have some knowledge there. In my ATX courses, I will help my students through those, recapping over the assumed knowledge, which is actually quite significant from TX. So you do need to go and get back up to speed with TX again. But I've got videos where I recap the main things from TX. Because I teach both TX and ATX, I've got a wealth of resources that I use for my TX students. So even if there's something extra that an ATX student thinks, oh, this would really help me, do you have anything? Well, yeah, I do. I can bring it, quickly adapt it and give it to them.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Now, at the time of recording, professional marks have yet to be introduced to ATAX. But I know that they will be introduced to ATAX. Can you confirm when they're coming in and what the impact will be from a studying point of view and maybe from an exam technique point of view as well?
Yeah, so tax ATX is the last of the options papers that will have more professional skills marks added into it. The previous structure was four professional marks, always in section A, but now they're being bulked up and it's going up to 20 marks.
From when? What's the first exam diet?
It will be June 2023 will be the first exam sitting for ATX when there will be this increase. So there's now going to be 20 professional marks in the paper and therefore 80 technical marks. And they're splitting the professional marks across each of the questions. There'll be 3 questions now instead of 4. And there will be 10 professional marks in question 1, 5 in question 2, and 5 in question 3. So they're spreading it across. So I think that makes it sound a little bit less scary, I hope, that students think actually, when you split it across the 3 questions, that's not a huge amount different from what we've already had for question 1 in the past, where we had 4 professional marks there before.
So these changes take place in June 23.
Yeah.
Crude question, blunt question. Is it going to make the exam easier or is it going to make the exam harder from the student's point of view?
Yeah, I think students do get quite concerned whenever there's a change. We've seen it so many times, haven't we, where the format of exams change every few years and students get really worried about being what they see as the guinea pigs, perhaps, going first. But because I've worked behind the scenes at 2 different accounting professional bodies, and I've worked on the exams, I've sat in the room when we've made the decisions about exams and papers, and I know how much work goes into making every single exam diet consistent, even when we've had these big changes, and making sure that every student, no matter what diet they go to, has just as much chance as the one in the previous diet. And it'll be consistent. Yes, it's different, but you get a tutor, you get started early, you get a good tutor, and you prepare yourself for it. And there should be no difference, regardless of which one you go for.
I get there's no difference in terms of the quality of the marking. I get there's no difference in terms of, from the quality of the examination academic level. But just purely from a student's point of view, would you go for June, or would you sort of go early, or what I'm trying to ask you?
I know. I like the move. I really do like the move to bringing in more professional marks. I think it, particularly with tax, a lot of times you'll see students stating things which are technically correct, but they're not relevant to that scenario. They're not relevant to that client's situation. And in fact, it's silly. If you were to sit down in front of a client and tell them, yes, you can carry your forward losses, and they go, but my business is ceasing to trade. Well, that's silly. That doesn't make sense. So I think it's good to bring in more professional marks because we will see students actually start to think about why they're writing down what they're writing down. Does it make sense?
And presumably they've got the time. Given that there's only 80 technical marks, they will have the time to be a little bit more reflective.
Yeah, so I don't know. Every person's situation is different. If it's your last exam and you just want to get it done, I absolutely can see you don't want to delay. You just want to get on and get through and get qualified. Absolutely. I don't think people should worry about being guinea pigs. I don't think people should worry about, oh, what if I fail, the last diet of an old format and then I have to resit. You're not going to start from scratch. And get a tutor supporting you and helping you through the changes as well. So I think it's a really good thing. Do I think it'll be easier for a student? For some students, perhaps taking a wee bit of the time pressure off them, less technical marks, but they are going to really need to know their stuff and know how it applies, and that's the thing that students can struggle with. So I think it's a good move from the ACCA.
Excellent. And just to recap, my final question: how do students get hold of you, Aileen? How do they track you down?
Yes, so you can visit my website, aileenedgar.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best place to start a conversation with me. Just send me a direct message through LinkedIn, connect with me, track me down on there. I'm easy to find, and I'd love to hear from students who just want to talk tax.
Hey, you like talking tax, don't you?
I do.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me, and you know how to get hold of Aileen there, and if you want to get hold of me, Tom Clendon, then I think LinkedIn is another great way of doing that. So thank you very much, and until next time, keep studying.